How to Win Friends and Influence People is probably one of the greatest books ever written on relationship skills and social skills, and how to win friends, how to influence people, how to become a leader, how to get people to like you. And in this video, we're going to cover some great ideas from this book. And first, I want to start with one of the biggest fundamentals of handling people, of dealing with people, and that is to make them feel important. The desire to feel important is one of the most fundamental urges that we all have. You, I, everyone that you see, everyone that's just walking around on the face of this earth, everyone wants to feel important and they consider themselves important. So William James, the great philosopher, he said that the deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated. What do we all want? We want recognition. We want to feel that we're important. We want to feel that people like us, people appreciate us. So we have to constantly realize that everyone wants to feel important, and we have to give them that feeling of importance. But it should not be insincere. Flattery is insincere. Appreciation is real. Flattery is shallow. It is almost just trying to get your way. But the truth is, you can always appreciate something about the other person. Flattery does not come from the heart. Flattery comes from being conniving. It's a more Machiavellian thing, if you would say so, compared to appreciation, which is real, which is more fundamental to their existence in some way. So try to appreciate. Don't try to flatter someone. John Dewey, the great philosopher, he said, the deepest urge in the human nature is the desire to feel important in the eyes of other people. And again, let me go over some stories or some interesting stories from the life of John D. Rockefeller. So one of his associates, Ed Bedford, he lost $1 million for the firm. And John D. Rockefeller, instead of getting mad at him and chastising him, he said he found a way to appreciate Ed Bedford in the moment. He's like, hey man, that's great. You saved 60% of the money instead of losing it all. And that's better than what I have been able to do at times in this business. So it's all good. And that made Ed Bedford feel important, feel good about what had happened, and made Ed Bedford want to stick around and work with John D. Rockefeller. And there's an interesting study of wives who ask for divorce, and the number one reason why wives ask for divorce is lack of appreciation. So you have to constantly figure out ways to make the other person feel important if you are going to have solid, real, powerful relationships with people. If you are going to develop people skills, this is one of the most fundamental skills you can develop. Make the other person feel important. All right. Now, I want to talk about how to get people to like you. And one of the biggest ways to get people to like you is to become interested in other people, become really interested in other people. And as Dale Carnegie says, you will make more friends in 2 months by being genuinely interested in other people than in 2 years by trying to make people interested in you. The most important thing that people are interested in is themselves. People are interested in themselves above everything else. So this is one of the biggest paradoxes of relationships. You have to like people in order for them to like you. You cannot expect someone to like you if you don't like them. We always mistake that by thinking that if only I am smart enough or intelligent enough or bright enough, the other person should like me. And it doesn't matter whether I like them or not. No, that's not the way it works. If you genuinely are interested in the other person, if you genuinely like the other person, and if you like them, then you will be able to get them to like you. And here's another way to look at it. Can you get someone to like you by talking to them all the time, by being interested in yourself, by being selfish, by trying to prove how much you know or how good you are or how important you are? Can you get them to like you by constantly being in their face and telling them how awesome you are? Probably not. The biggest reason, and if you look back at all of your life, you'll always find the biggest reason why you like people, why you like any of the friends in your life or family members in your life, it's because they like you. They have a genuine liking for you, and that leads to you liking them. So it's a very important paradox. Become genuinely interested in other people, and they will in turn become interested in you, and they will in turn like you. And that's one of the fundamentals to getting people to like you. All right, now let's talk about how to win people to your way of thinking. always begin in a friendly way. It always begin in a friendly way. The great Abraham Lincoln, he said, "It is an old and true maxim that a drop of honey catches more flies than a gallon of gall." So with men, if you would win a man to your cause, first convince him that you are his sincere friend. Therein a drop of honey that catches his heart, which is the great high road to his reason. Let me break this down for you. The key sentence here, he said, is a drop of honey that catches his heart is the great high road to his reason. So you have to first get to someone's heart in order to be able to reason with them, in order to win them to your way of thinking. You cannot just get into logical argument and begin in an unfriendly way and try to win them to your ways. It's not going to happen. So there's a really interesting story of a tenant who was trying to get his rent reduced from the landlord. So the tenant sent a letter to the landlord threatening to leave if the rent wasn't reduced, but the landlord was not going to give in to such requests had never given in to such requests in the past, and most probably wasn't going to budge. So the property manager arranged a meeting between the landlord and the tenant about the rent issues, but the tenant now decided to change his ways. So instead he began in a friendly way with the landlord, and he says, "Hey, I really love this place. You do a great job of maintaining it. You're always very responsible. You're always very responsive, and I like you. However, the rent is a little too much for me to pay right now." And the landlord kind of started to melt. And he says, "Hey, that's great to hear that you are satisfied. Most of these people here are just complaining, and I'm just happy to see that I have a really satisfied tenant. So, okay, go ahead. I will reduce your rent so that I can have you as a satisfied tenant." And the landlord reduced the rent by a certain amount. But the tenant said, "Hey, I'm sorry. I really appreciate you for lowering the rent, but that's still not within my budget. I would love to stay, but I can't. But if you reduce the rent by another $100, then I will stay." And the landlord agreed without even any back and forth. Imagine trying to do that compared to arguing with the landlord, going back and forth and making all sorts of logical reasoning arguments. The royal road to any person's heart the royal road to reason is through their heart, right? That's how you win people to your way of thinking. So always begin in a friendly way. If you begin in a combative way, you lose the other person. That's what the tenant did. Initially, he tried the combative way. That didn't work. So in the meeting, he began in a friendly way. And that is one of the easiest ways to win people to your way of thinking. Another great way to win people to your way of thinking is let the other person feel that the idea is his or hers. So there was a X-ray machine company that was trying to sell X-ray machines to a new hospital. And there was a head of the buying division for the X-ray machines at the hospital named Dr. Lewis, and he had a lot of salespeople for different different X-ray companies calling him on and trying to sell him on their X-ray machines. But this X-ray machine company did something completely different. They sent a letter to Dr. Lewis and said, "Hey, our machine is not the perfect. But we're trying to improve it the best we can. And we would love to hear your feedback on how we can improve it." Now, you see what they're doing. They're letting the other person feel that the idea is his or hers. They're letting Dr. Lewis feel that he has some participation in this whole thing. So Dr. Lewis, when he got the letter, he went to the X-ray company office, analyzed it thoroughly, and offered a bunch of suggestions. At the end of it, the X-ray company came back and showed him the X-ray machine just as Dr. Lewis had suggested. So what happened as a result of it? Which X-ray machine did Dr. Lewis order? The ones he helped modify and improve, the ones that he felt like was his idea, or the ones that were not his idea, or the ones that he had really no interest in except that the salespeople were calling on him. Of course, he went with the one that he helped to modify and improve. So always let the other person feel that the idea is his or hers rather than imposing your idea on them. Try to ask questions. Try to get them to give feedback on how you can improve something, or try to get them to give you feedback on whatever conversation you're having, and let the other person feel that it is her or his idea. And that will always help you win them to your way of thinking. All right, so now let's talk about some powerful laws of leadership, powerful ways to improve your leadership skills. One of which is how to find faults with people, how to criticize them without ever criticizing them really, or without making them feel like you're criticizing them. So to find faults, begin with praise and honest appreciation. That's the key. We often make the mistake of just telling people exactly what is their fault, what is wrong with them, and we think that will be more expedient, that will be faster. But truth is, it never leads us anywhere, because as soon as you find fault with people, people shut down. And this is something I learned in Toastmasters very early on. By the way, I highly recommend Toastmasters for anyone who's trying to learn how to speak in public, anyone who's trying to improve their communication skills. Just go to toastmasters.org, and there's probably a club within your local area. It's one of the best and the cheapest ways to learn public speaking skills. So one of the things you learn in Toastmasters as an evaluator, when you evaluate other people's speeches, is to always gives feedback in a sandwich format, which is initially when you evaluate someone's speech, no matter how good or bad the speech was, we always start with the positives of the speech. First, we give appreciation. We appreciate whatever effort that person has put in. We appreciate the quality of the speech. Whatever they did, there's always something you can find positive in that thing. No matter how bad the speech, there is always something you can find good in that. You can always find praise. You can always find ways to praise that person for their speech. There are always positives to be found. And now that you have given them what you appreciate, or now that you've given them the positives, and now that you've given them some honest appreciation, now you can talk about 2 to 3 key things that they could improve in their next speech. There's a very consistent format as an evaluator in Toastmasters. We always start with first giving appreciation, and only then do we talk about things that the other person can improve. So never try to criticize directly, but instead begin with praise and honest appreciation, and then move on to telling them a few things that they could improve on. One of the most powerful ways to develop your leadership skills. Another key to building your leadership skills, talk about your own mistakes before criticizing other people. That's how you build trust. So in Toastmasters, I remember when you give speech, let's say someone just gave their first speech, and now as an evaluator, I am giving them my feedback on their speech. I often go back to the time when I gave my first speech, and I remember I was really nervous and choppy, but I can always find that if the other person wasn't really as nervous or as choppy or had no signs of nervousness, and they were flowing very nicely, it's great for me to begin with my own mistakes, with my own challenges from the past, and then go on to tell them, hey, these are the things I think you could improve. These are the things it would be great to see you add maybe a few more details, a few more stories, whatever it is. So always start whenever you have to find fault, whenever you have to criticize their mistakes or anything like that, first talk about how you might have made that mistake in the past. Hey, I have done crazy things like that. I have failed. Remember we talked about John D. Rockefeller's story earlier, how he told his associate, hey, you at least save the company 60%. There are times when I couldn't even do that. In fact, I lost more than that. So it's okay. So that's how John D. Rockefeller did it. He talked about his own mistakes before criticizing the other person. Now, how do you get the other person to do what you want them to do? The key here is to make the other person happy about doing that thing. Identify what the other person really, really wants deep inside. Identify how this thing that you want them to do can help them get what they want. And then talk to the other person about the benefit they want and how this task, this thing that you want them to do, can help them get that benefit.